a very, very warm welcome, Imke, to this journey. Thank you so much for gifting us this time, attention.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to meet via Zoom.
Great. Uh, Imke, I heard you on Conscious TV. That's how I came to know about you. And I really loved the way that conversation happened. So for all the viewers, I'll request them to also go and look at that conversation. It was beautiful. It was very insightful.
Okay.
Because starting, that I generally start with my guests to my first question is generally asking them, are there any memories from their childhood or teenage years that has stayed with them and has come back to them again and again? And if you can share, a couple of such memories.
Yeah. Well, if I think about that, it might be the reason why did I study physics. It has to do with, well, as a teenager, I did a lot of sports, especially athletics. And I was part of a group with special promotion. So once a year, we had the chance to, for intensive training. For a week, we lived in tents, a whole day of training. And in the evenings, we were sitting around the campfire, singing songs, watching the stars. And so I said, oh, well, I would like to know how that is possible. Where do these stars come from? How does the universe run? And things like that. And I found out it would be a good idea to study physics to get more into astronomy and cosmology. Yeah. And so I think it was yeah, a little bit a romantic starting point combined with a lot of interest in mathematics and natural sciences. Yeah.
Interesting. And that sort of led you to take these disciplines, and you completed your PhD in
In physics.
physics. Yeah.
Yes, and I had astronomy as a part of it. And yeah, after I did my PhD in physics, I found out there were still a few questions open. So I realized that my original question was not only um, about how does the universe run, but also why am I here? Why is the universe there? How, like the German philosopher Leibniz, you probably know, he uh, put the question, why is there something and not rather nothing? And I found out that is also a question I have, and it's not really discussed in the physics lectures. And it is for me in the same way important, not only to have the facts. Before I always thought, oh, well, if I knew this and that, and then I would understand. And now it was like, maybe the kind of question I'm, I'm interested now is beyond what we learn at university. Isn't it more, let's say, a spiritual way I got interested in? And so I chose the opportunity. After my PhD, I had the opportunity to go to China. And yeah, it was planned for 3 months and as a postdoc. And I fell ill and got a treatment by a Qigong master, Qigong doctor, and got healed. And I said, oh, how could that happen? So um, yeah, find out how this is possible. And I mean, the important thing for me was it was not just stories heard from somebody, but I had experienced it myself. I didn't know anything about Qigong. I had done a little bit of Tai Chi Chuan. Then I said, well, it happened. There is something that works that is not um, cannot be explained by scientific ideas. So I will find out how that works. So I went for another 3 months, it was in 1988, to learn about Chinese medicine, about acupuncture, because to my understanding at that time, I thought there's mm, the biggest theoretical background. Qigong things were not so much structured as they are now. And yeah, and so I had 2 more years as a postdoc in Germany, and was working part-time and part-time studying modern and classical Chinese and philosophy.
Interesting.
Yeah, for
Interesting.
2 years, and yeah. Then my daughter came up, and I had a few years of other things to do, and yeah, then she grew up more and more, and I had more time to think about, well, why did I study physics? Why was there never a contradiction for myself being a Qigong teacher and a physicist? And then in the German Qigong associations, we have, or we had in the 1990s, every 2 years, like conferences. And one of these days, one of these conference headlines, I saw something like Qigong and physics. I said, ah, okay. Maybe they're calling me. And I started to prepare a talk, and doing this, then my book Qigong and quantum physics came up. In this book, I had the idea I was something like combining um, what was of most interest for me from the science part and from the spiritual part. And Qigong is something it moves between the both, because Qigong is something like it is an inner practice. Um, the idea is, if you do Qi movements, you keep good health, and that can be measured. People that practice Qigong need for some diseases less medication. There are studies about it. And so that is the outer part, the studies, and the less medication for patients. And the inner part is you feel more centered, more calm, healthy, and feel good. Yeah.
You mentioned that when you came back from Beijing the first time and you discussed with your colleagues about the experience that you had,
Hmm.
they could not resonate with that,
Yeah.
and they sort of rejected the possibility that such thing can happen.
Hmm.
And so I had a broader question, uh, and I believe that in human history, across human history, we can. I imagine that there would be a lot of people who would have asked questions to
Hmm.
people in power or people in rationality or wisdom. And then there were a lot of people who would have been turned down because people here would have thought that these questions are not relevant or these experiences are not relevant. Um, I wonder what would lead science to reject questions in the first place. What do you think?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, well, my idea is that studying physics, um, you have to do with things that are outside. So physical results are objective, reproducible, and they are you get them in the outside world by experiments. Um, that is fine, and that keeps you a little bit away from it. So you personal, you can say, of course, there's a difference. Is somebody very new does an experiment, or somebody repeats it who did it for 10 years? But the idea is that in principle, uh, it's not independent of the person if an experiment runs or not. which kind of results comes out. So as a person, as an individual, you are on a safe side. You're something like behind the experiment, and that it's a kind of protection. And I think, oh, that's my idea. I think, yeah, well, the experiment doesn't run today. It's not that I had maybe trouble with someone and I'm in bad shape or so. So in questions you ask in natural sciences, as a personality, you step back. And the other things, if you are talking about spiritual experiences, you are always directly involved as a person. So your own yeah, talents and not talents are very obvious, and you're not so safe. You're always part of the experiment. And I think, well, just an idea I have, it has to do with courage. It has to do with the courage to say, well, I'm ready to see all the weak parts I have. Something like that. I don't know. I mean, I think it has to do with courage to say, well, what you were talking about, you have had a Qigong treatment and a healing. I do not want to believe that, because um, think, if I would think things like that could happen, I would have a problem with my mindset, with my model of how the universe runs. There are many people that already have found out that the human being is not just the outside, it's not just the body. I think it has to do with courage.
Um,
And oh, and maybe the kind of question one asks. I mean, you have to admit yourself that you are asking about the meaning of life. So I think in natural science, you do not ask the meaning of life. You ask how does it happen that the Earth runs around the sun, something like that, and not the meaning of life itself. Mhm.
if I were to say that in the inventory of experiences that human beings have, in the inventory of experiences that we all have, there are some things where we are able to explain what happened and how it happened. And there are a lot of things that we are not able to explain as to what happened and how did that happen.
Mhm.
Uh, but then we do not maybe give time or reflect, or even after doing that, we do not reach at any answers with the things that are not, that don't answer themselves. Then maybe we hang on to whatever is explainable and just run with it and keep moving with it, because as they say, life must go on, and then you must live your day, put food on the table. There's so many work to be done. um, I don't have a question here, but do you feel like suggesting anything here, or we can move from here?
Can there happen things that are not explainable by science? Something in this direction?
Yeah. So part of the question is this, and part of
Mhm.
the question is, already we have so many questions where we are not able to explain things,
Mhm.
and then we keep them aside and only work with things that we can explain. And
Mhm.
we
Mhm.
don't know what happens with these that we've kept them aside. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we should we should realize also the questions where we do not see the answer. I think there are a lot of questions that we cannot answer, but being aware that the question arose is already part of the solution. And I don't think that all unexplained questions today might be explainable by science. I don't know. I mean, of course, science will progress and everything, but I think it has to do in which way do I look at the world. Um, do I look at the world in a part? what are the underlying patterns that I can find out in the external world? Or do I think part of the questions I cannot answer right now might be part of an internal process? So that there are questions that I only can answer by personal experience. So it is something like the opposite. If you have in science, you have a reproducible objective in the outside. So how about the questions that, or the phenomena that happen once, happen inside, are completely subjective. They are not um, negligible. You cannot leave them apart. I don't think it's a good idea to leave them apart. I think, since Descartes, we have the splitting of mind and matter, and I mean, it is good in a way that, let's say, if you have science and spirituality, there had been times where religion told what scientists are allowed to find. So it's good we have left that. But now I think a more sophisticated, in a more sophisticated way, we have to include the internal part. Well, for me, and let's say I'm having a lot to do with the yin yang symbol in the Chinese philosophy. The half black, the black and the white half, but within the black part of the symbol is a white dot, and within the white part of the symbol is a black dot. And that is something I think gives the answer, that if you see that in a cosmological way, so let's say like Daoist cosmology, it is very similar to the physical cosmology. Yeah, in the physics we have like the Big Bang, a lot of energy, and then wherever energy is, it can materialize in matter and antimatter pairs, depending on how much energy you have. And the same is, I mean, the same structure you find in the Taoist cosmology. You start with the Tao, which is, it can be called the void. It contains everything, the Tao, the highest principle, whatever. You start with something hard to define, or not, you cannot define it. And this Tao splits into yin and yang. And so everything that appears in polarities. So, and well, the Taoists say the Tao is in everything. And if I start with a model that whatever exists in polarities, in pairs. So, let's say if you have a magnetism, you have a north pole and a south pole. If you have a charge, you have a plus charge and a minus charge to give a neutral one. If you have human being, if you have like male and female, if you have the 24 hours, you have day and night, and so you can continue as long as you want. If you go to IT, you have a bit set or not set, 0 or 1. So if you go to DNA, 2 strands and whatever. So it is a common principle that things that appear in pairs and polarities and opposites that give the whole. If that is an ubiquitous principle, why should we not follow this principle when we try to get insight in our existence, in the universe, how it works, and so on? So if you follow this line, if we use a young method, like use a rational mind, use science, it is clear if we want like holistic results, we should add the other part. A yin method, something like a spiritual training a spiritual kind of information to make it complete. And the idea I have about, well, as a physicist, I felt always very bad when I read about the atomic bomb. I said, well, they started uh, just to understand how does matter work, and that's what comes out of the atomic bomb. That's a disaster. So how does it come that things that are meant in a, let's say, a good way, whatever, um, can get such a negative output? So what did we miss? Um, what did we forget? What, yeah, neglect while we were working on it? And the same in biology. I mean, it's so nice we understand the genetic code. Yeah, now it gets out genetic food. Mm, yeah, and with like with the internet, it was planned to move large amounts of data on physical experiments. Yeah, now we have global observation. I don't know. I mean, there are many outcomes I'm not so happy with, and I'm just asking myself, why do all these things that started in a good manner come out um, with many results that we do not like?
When you were describing polarities, uh, uh, to me, what was coming to my mind was the concept of one and the other,
Mm-hmm.
or one and the others.
Yeah.
And the relationship between one and the others or other could be one that of opposite or complementing or absolutely unique and they don't have any connection. So between one and the other, there could be various relationships,
Mm-hmm.
one of which is polarity. And what I heard you say, and you can correct me, is that the moment we participate in the world, we are constantly creating these distinctions: foreground, background,
Mm-hmm.
this person, that person. As you rightly and beautifully pointed out in terms of charge, North Pole, South Pole,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and so on. Uh, in some sense, there are these different discrete parts that we come across with in our lives, and then we try to explain them
Mm-hmm.
in terms of patterns of relationships and so on and so forth. How did your background in physics help you see this even deeper and maybe connect it with Qigong? Is my question clear?
Yeah, how my physical background helped me to understand polarity?
To understand Qigong.
To understand Qigong. Ah, yeah. Um, or the other way around. Qigong helped me to understand physics.
Yes.
Um, because in Qigong, we have, well, let's say some of the simplest movements is you get in a position like you're holding a ball and you're lifting a ball and then you turn and then you descend the ball. So if you see that in kind of polarities, it is just rising and descending. Other part could be just like opening and closing, could be other kinds of movement. And during these Qigong exercises, I understood that polarities only work together in the movements. So whatever I do, I cannot move without being aware of the opposite. If I, let's say, um, get up a little bit, I have to feel the ground. Otherwise, I cannot get up. And it was like um, doing Qigong, I felt like I experienced that, um, yeah, this complementarity of polarities. They are not opposite. Um, and enemies, but they, yeah, complementary in the sense they together they give the whole. And it was like physically in my body to experience how rising and descending gives one. And with this idea, well, in physics or quantum physics, you have the fact that quantum objects appear according to the experiments you do. Quantum objects can appear as waves or as particles. And when you get that in the lectures, you say, okay, why? You do not, well, I felt like I did not really get a satisfying answer. And only when I was working on the book, Qigong with Quantum Physics, I found out that, and then found out that I had read it years before. It, you know, from Fritjof Capra, the Tao of Physics. And there he has a picture from Niels Bohr's coat of arms. And, well, step a little bit. The foundation of quantum physics, I mean, the problem with wave and particle was solved by Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg. They, in 1927, they set up like the Copenhagen interpretation. And things, well, of course, other people were also involved, but what impressed me the most was Niels Bohr's part was the principle of complementarity. So quantum objects have both, they are particles and they are waves. And I mean, this paradox came up in 1905 when Einstein solved he got his Nobel Prize for the photo effect.
Okay.
And that's like he proved light is a particle, and before people knew light is a wave. And then 1905, they found, well, both is truth, so how can we solve it? And from 1905 until 1927 is 22 years. I mean, all these Nobel Prize winners were thinking about how to solve this problem. And Niels Bohr solved the problem. That's not really written in detail anywhere. But I think he got the inspiration from Taoism. And to say, oh, okay, this is contradictory. Oh, no, it is not excluding, but we have to include both to understand. And for, let's say, I understood it only when I saw Niels Bohr's coat of arms, where there is a yin-yang symbol and it is written, opposites, contraria sunt complementa. Opposites are complementary. And I said, oh, well, he got probably the inspiration from Taoism to reconcile the wave particle problem. And that I found incredibly impressive. And then I thought, well, there is no contradiction. It is just we decide in which way we look at the world. Oh, you said why? Well, the question was, how does Qigong help me to understand physics? Yeah,
And the, or yeah, or the other
yeah,
way.
and vice versa. You know, so um, the yin yang symbol helped me to understand the wave particle paradox, and also if we go on, then in the newer times, in the 1980s, there was another phenomenon in quantum physics. The entanglement was proved by Alan Aspect. Entanglement says that particles that once formed like one system were then separated, but they keep a kind of connection, a kind of correlation that cannot be understood physically. We can work with it. It is clear how it, I mean, how you get along with it. You can use it, but really, how can you explain it? And then I go back to Taoism and say, well, in Taoism, it is clear that yin and yang can never be separated, because if yin and yang are separated, then life turns to death. So if there are like connection or correlations between a system of two parts, the two parts are separated, and the correlation is kept, although the two parts are very far from each other. I can, let's say, going to Taoism, I have a feeling that, okay, yeah, in physics, I say, well, completely understandable how something like entanglement can appear. And so, yeah.
Interesting, interesting.
So I think maybe all the things we do not understand in physics, in science, in life as it is, if we would make something, let's have a look at physics, let's have a look at spirituality, let's have a look at physics, a look at philosophy, and maybe both enrich each other, also one can learn from the other, and then we get a feeling of understanding.
Interesting. If we use, or if we dance and are able to dance between spirituality and science,
Mm-hmm.
um, we could still be in a space where there would still be things that cannot be explained, cannot be tapped into, and we may need to uh, have faith,
Mm-hmm.
or believe that there is something beyond
Mm-hmm.
that is still holding this in some manner which we can't make sense of right now. Would you agree, or would you want to expand on something like this, or you disagree with this?
Um, yeah, I think it helps. Well, let's see. For myself, to answer the question, why am I here? It helps me to feel myself as being part of a bigger system. So if there are underlying patterns in the universe, I feel like being a wave in the ocean. So it's I don't know if you know, that's a German Zen master and Benedictine monk. His name is Williges Jäger, and he has written a book called "The Wave is the Ocean."
Okay.
So we appear as individual waves, but if we only see ourselves as individual waves, then we're asking, yeah, wave up, wave down, that was it. But if we feel ourselves as being waves, part of the bigger ocean, then the existence makes sense. It's like the higher principle um, appears in the many different waves, but the ocean stays. The ocean stays, gives a kind of security, um, which is not dependent on anything, but it is just part of existence. And there appear the many waves, 7 billion people, but they're part of the same ocean. And I think that gives another responsibility living your life, another feeling of my life may have a little meaning. Um, and yeah, waves come up and come down, and people live and people die. And even right now, with all these corona problems and many people dying, and I yeah, I don't know, it gives me a kind of internal peace, saying, well, now my wave is still up, it will go down one day, and I don't know, but it Williges Jäger also, had a interesting saying. I am trying to translate it into English. It was, if God is the ocean, why should I be anxious that my boat could go down, could crash? Where am I falling? I'm falling well, in God's hands, or in the hands of the bigger principle, the bigger pattern behind.
So going back to your book that you wrote, if you can take us through one or two concepts that you think that are coming up for you right now, and it could be helpful for us to understand a little bit about your book more.
Yeah. Well, in the Qigong meets quantum physics, first I tell a little bit about Daoist philosophy, about the yin yang principle, um, about Qigong, how this is to understand, and then I'm trying to develop uh, that what I talked about on the beginning of our interview. Um, I tried to draw a line why it is important to take both positions, not saying, well, I'm a scientist, I'm not interested in spirituality, I'm a spiritual being, I don't want anything to do with rationality. So yeah, first part is about Taoism, and then the other part is, well, if I say insight or understanding of the universe can only be if I can only get if I combine both methods of getting information or experience, and then what could be the yin part to accomplish science. So that could be mysticism, and not mysticism in a, well, I'm just sitting on a cloud and looking in a purple sky, but like mysticism, like in Zen Buddhism or in Qigong, like an education where you learn, even if you're listening to internal processes, to get your ego out of the way, because I think that is the problem in both parts, also in science and in spirituality, that sometimes we standing in our way with our ego. And if we just see ourselves like this, I'm a wave, part of the ocean. Uh,
When you were explaining, it occurred to me that ego is sort of a particle, and when the ego is submerged, we are more like waves.
yeah. Oh,
It,
if the ego is a particle or a wave, you mean?
yeah, I was thinking that ego appears to be like a particle,
Okay.
but if we subdue the ego, then we become wave in the ocean.
Okay. Yeah. You can see it that way. Yeah. Although, I mean, Um, of course, in science, there are many people very proud of their ego and their achievement, but also in the spiritual world, there are people that have to do with their ego. They have some problems with it. But your idea is nice, yeah.
Go ahead, sorry I interrupted you.
It would be the particle consciousness to be more in the ego, and it would be more the wave consciousness. The wave consciousness to be part of the ocean. Yeah. Okay, very. And there I'm um, going back to books from Ken Wilber, from John Blofeld. Um, you know, from Ken Wilber, Up from Eden. It's quite an old book, but I absolutely love this book because it was the first time. Well, I mean, it's difficult to read, um, but in the beginning pages, he wrote something like, um, for men, there is a deep yearning for a unity. And I was so, I think, well, he's a biochemist. He has the courage to say, we are all looking for unity, searching for completeness. My God. I think then I started, oh, it is allowed, well, I can allow myself to say, I'm wondering, why am I here on earth? What do I have to do here? what it is good for. And then I think when I read that, I felt like I have the allowance to say, to ask the questions I do well. And before, let's say with my colleagues during my PhD, if I asked questions or said something, well, I wonder why this is good for, I said, well, what's the meaning of life? Well, that's not our question. Our question is how to run our spectrometer, not our equipment. And yeah, and I found it very helpful, Ken Wilber's books. And also, yeah, and in English, there are a lot of books about Taoism from Livia Cohn. She's a professor of religious science in Florida, and she is also a publisher and has lots of fantastic books about Taoism and from sinologists, from religious scientists. And she was the one who translated my book from the German, because she's originally German, and she translated my book Qigong means quantum physics into English.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and this was so great because she is so open-minded. She is experienced in Tai Chi, Qigong, in Taoism, and of course, for the physics part, I had some physics professor to read the translations, which is my brother-in-law, and yeah, I mean, it was really a great luck good chance to have her as a translator. And so if you're more interested in Taoism, in the Three Pines Press publishing, there are many interesting books. And yeah, what else could be? Yeah, Williges Jäger, I mean, probably his books are also translated into English, but I don't know. Sorry, I didn't check that before. Yeah, Ken Wilber, John Blofeld, Zhuangzi, Laozi. Yeah, and actually, if we talk about Chinese philosophers, we always say Zhuangzi, Laozi, but if we think of Confucius, he was the first one to set up the golden rule. What you don't want that others do to you, don't do to others. And Kant later expanded that to the kategorischen Imperativ. I don't know what's in English. Yeah, so yeah, the great philosophers.
Yeah. Confucian philosophy is different from Tao.
Okay.
And if you can share a little bit about that, like what's the distinction?
Yeah, okay. Confucius, he is, it's an ethic, social ethic. He says how to behave like man to woman, rulers to the people. And for our, let's say, for our nowadays feeling, it sounds very old-fashioned, but he doesn't only say that the people have to respect the ruler, but he also says that the ruler is responsible that the people can live in a good way. And that I found so much interesting, because it's the both sides, the responsibility. A ruler has only, and that was expanded then by Mengde, one of the following Confucianists. He said, if a ruler doesn't take care of his people, he has no longer the right to be a ruler. And so I think, yeah, that thing's very interesting. And one have to say, Confucius, he lived in the 6th century before Christ. And at that time, there were no civil rights. There was nothing. So sometimes we say, oh, Confucius, he said the woman has to respect the man. And we are like in the gender topic, we're not very happy about that kind. But we have to see from which time does that come. Yeah, there were no civil rights, so he was the first one to to put these relations. So in Confucianism, it is rather a little bit more for the outside, how to behave as a human being, also how to behave following the way. The Tao is another word for the way, also live in a right way, let's say. It was his idea, and he said the world will be in harmony if people follow the way and if the relationships work, let's say. However, he might have put it down into words. And Taoism, the Daoist philosophers like Zhuangzi and Laozi, it is more the inner way, um, um, how to flow with the Tao, how to get a feeling, how to flow with the Tao. The Tao is the underlying principle in this way. And yeah, it's more the Taoists are not so interested in joining rulers or getting a good position in the outside world. They are more cultivating, self-cultivation is what they are working on. And Confucius is more how to behave in an ethically good way in the outside world.
If you can also help us a little more on where do you see the blending or similarities between Qigong and quantum uh, world? Uh, how do you see both of them complementing or mirroring each other, or you see one in the other?
Ah, how Qigong and quantum physics fits together.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, um, that is, I think, well, in quantum physics, we learn atomic objects can appear as a wave or particle, for example, and both fit together. In Qigong, I see if I'm doing any kind of movement, um, I have opening, closing that fits together. So quantum physics shows in the external world, Qigong shows me in the external while I'm moving, but in the feeling, I feel more complete doing this. And it is the same principle that appears in different ways. The principle that whatever is or whatever comes up in polarities. And so if whatever I do, I should probably be aware. Um, well, C.G. Jung, the psychoanalyst, called it the shadow. Be aware of the shadow, whatever you do. So once I light a candle, I create the shadow at the same time. And I think that is what we have, what I find interesting to look at. Whatever I'm doing and I'm trying it in a good way, being aware of the shadow I produce. Yeah. And one thing, let's say, I think the problems we have to do with our low consciousness, in a sense that we have only 3 dimensions where we can get along. We have the 3 dimensions of space and maybe time as a dimension, but we are very, very limited in our understanding, which is due to our consciousness. For example, if I say we are like 3 dimensional beings, and the problems we cannot solve, I think, are due to the fact that we are restricted to these 3 dimensions. Let me see if that goes. I have here like a cylinder, a piece of paper rolled. This is a 3 dimensional thing. If I put it to 2 dimensions, you get a projection. Now it is a circle. If I get another projection, now it looks like a rectangle. If I only see the circle and the rectangle, let's say I'm a 2 dimensional being, I see, oh, I have 2 phenomena. Here is a circle, there's a rectangle. They don't have anything to do with each other because my consciousness is so low. I can only see this is a rectangle and this is a circle. And now, if I had more capacities, more dimensions in my consciousness, then I would say, well, I have a dimension more. I can see, well, this is a cylindric paper. This is a three-dimensional thing. And although it appears to be here a circle and there a rectangle, it is just two projections of one thing. And I think all the problems we have are due to our limited consciousness. We think, oh, there we have a wave, there we have a particle. Oh, paradox, contradiction. Well, go just a dimension higher, we see, well, it's a quantum object that in this kind of experiment appears as a wave and here as a particle. And yeah, and so now we are at the point where scientists are, well, nowadays, of course, science is very important. Scientists have very interesting results and so on. And scientists just stand on their way. Spiritual people say, well, we have other experiences, we see other things. Well, why don't we step on top of that and get scientists and spiritualists together to get a holistic view of the world?
See, I'm mindful of your time, Imka. I think we are towards the close of this. But I do have a lot of questions still pending. Maybe what I will do is I'll request for another time from you so that we can continue our conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for having the chance to meeting you and talking about interesting subjects. Thanks a lot.